Welcome everyone. It is 3 p.m. and it's time for the Server Room Show. This is episode 80. Today I continue talking about OS2, IBM's OS2. In the first episode I did the simple introduction, then immediately went on to talking about IBM OS2's development history from 1985, the joint development between Microsoft and IBM, through the breakup in 1990 and the reasons led to that. Then 1992 and the 32-bit era. I talked about DOS compatibility, Windows 3.x compatibility, the warp years between 1994 and 1996, OS2 version 3.0, which was labeled or renamed to OS2 warp. And I also spoke about Workplace OS, which was tend to be a replacement for OS2, and it was planned for IBM Power platforms, but eventually it never happened. It never went through more than pre-alpha status. Now to continue this journey with IBM's OS2, the next part to talk about is downsizing. A project was launched internally by IBM to evaluate the looming competitive situation with Microsoft Windows 95. Primary concerns included the major code quality issues in the existing OS2 product, resulting in over 20 service packs, each requiring more diskettes than the original installation, and the ineffective and heavily matrixed development organization in Boca Raton, where the consultants reported that basically everybody reports to everybody, and Austin. That study, tightly classified as registered confidential and printed only in numbered copies, identified untenable weaknesses and failures across the board in the personal systems division as well as across IBM as a whole. This resulted in a decision being made at a level above the division to cut over 95% of the overall budget for the entire product line and all new development, including Workplace OS, eliminate the Boca Raton development lab, and all sales and marketing efforts of the product, and to lay off over 1,300 development individuals, as well as sales and support personnel. 990 million US dollar had been spent in the last full year. Warp 4 became the last distributed version of OS2. 2001, fading out. A small and dedicated community remained faithful to OS2 for many years after its final mainstream release, but overall OS2 failed to catch on in the mass market and is little used outside certain niches where IBM traditionally had a stronghold. For example, many bank installations, especially automated teller machines, ATMs, run OS2 with a customized user interface. French SNCF National Railways used OS2 1.x in the thousands of ticket selling machines. Telecom companies such as Nortel used OS2 in some voicemail systems. Also, OS2 was used for the host PC used to control the satellite operations support system equipment installed at NPR member stations from 1994 to 2007, and used to receive the network's programming via satellite. Although IBM began indicating shortly after the release of Warp 4 that OS2 would eventually be withdrawn, the company did not end support until December 31st of 2006. Sales of OS2 stopped on December the 23rd of 2005. The latest IBM OS2 Warp version is 4.52. which was released for both desktop and server systems in December of 2001. IBM is still delivering defect support for a fee. IBM urges customers to migrate their often highly complex applications to e-business technologies such as Java in a platform neutral manner. Once application migration is completed, IBM recommends migration to a different operating system, suggesting Linux as an alternative. Third-party development. After IBM discontinued the development of OS2, various third parties approached IBM to take over future development of the operating system. The OS2 software vendor Stardock made such a proposal to IBM in 1999, but it was not followed through by the company. Serenity Systems succeeded in negotiating an agreement with IBM and began reselling OS2 as Ecom Station in 2001. Ecom Station is now sold by xeu.com. The most recent version is version 2.1, was released in 2011. In 2015, Arcan Noe LLC announced that they had secured an agreement with IBM to resell OS2. They released the first version of their OS2 based operating system in 2017 as Arca OS. As of 2021, there have been multiple releases of Arca OS, and it remains under active development. Petitions for open source. Many people hoped that IBM would release OS2 or a significant part of it as open source. Petitions were held in 2005 and 2007, but IBM refused them, citing legal and technical reasons. It is unlikely that the entire OS will be open at any point in the future because it contains a third-party code to which IBM does not have copyright, and much of this code is from Microsoft. IBM also once engaged in a technology transfer with Commodore, licensing Amiga technology for OS2 2.0, 2.0 and above in exchange for the Rex scripting language. This means that OS2 may have some code that was not written by IBM, which can therefore prevent the OS from being re-announced as open sourced in the future. On the other hand, IBM donated Object Rex for Windows and OS2 to Open Object Rex project maintained by the Rex Language Association on SourceForge. There was a petition arranged by OS2 Word to open parts of the OS. Open source operating systems such as Linux have already profited from OS2 indirectly through IBM's release of the improved GFS file system, which was ported from the OS2 code base. As IBM didn't release the source of the OS2 JFS driver, developers ported the Linux driver back to Ecom Station and added the functionality to boot from GFS partition. This new GFS driver has been integrated into Ecom Station version 2.0 and later into Arca OS version 5.0. Features and technology. User interface. The graphic system has a layer named Presentation Manager that manages windows, fonts and icons. This is similar in functionality to a non-networked version of X11 or the Windows GDI. On top of this lies the Workplace Shell, WPS, introduced in OS2 2.0. WPS is an object-oriented shell allowing the user to perform traditional computing tasks such as accessing files, printers, launching legacy programs and advanced object-oriented tasks using built-in and third-party application objects that extended the shell in an integrated fashion and not available on any other mainstream operating system. WPS follows IBM's Common User Access user interface standards. WPS represents objects such as disks, folders, files, programs, files, program objects, and printers using the system object model SOM, which allows code to be shared among applications, possibly written in different programming languages. A distributed version called DSOM allowed objects on different computers to communicate. DSOM is based on Corba. The object-oriented aspect of SOM is similar to and a direct competitor to Microsoft's component object model, though it is implemented in a radically different manner. For instance, one of the most notable differences between SOM and COM is SOM's support for inheritance, one of the most fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming. COM does not have such support. SOM and DSOM are no longer being developed. The multimedia capabilities of OS2 are accessible through media control interface commands. The last update, bundled with the IBM version of Netscape Navigator plugins, added support for MPEG files, support for newer formats such as PNG, progressive JPEG, DIVX, OGG, and MP3 comes from third parties. Sometimes it is integrated with the multimedia system, but in other offers it comes as a standalone application. Application development. OS2 also includes radical advancement in application development with compound document technology called OpenDoc, which was developed with Apple. OpenDoc proved interesting as a technology but was not widely used or accepted by users or developers. OpenDoc is also no longer being developed. Networking. The TCP/IP stack is based on the open source BSD stack as visible with the SCCS but compatible tools. IBM included tools such as FTP and Telnet and even servers for both commands. IBM sold several networking extensions including NFS support and an X11 server. Drivers. Hardware vendors were reluctant to support device drivers for alternative operating systems, including OS2, and Linux leaving users with few choices from a select few vendors. To relieve this issue for video cards, IBM licensed the reduced version of the Cytec display drivers, allowing users to choose from a wide selection of cards supported through Cytec's modular driver design. Virtualization. OS2 has historically been more difficult to run in a virtual machine than most other legacy x86 operating systems because of its extensive reliance on the full set of features of the x86 CPU. In particular, OS2's use of Ring 2 prevented it from running in VMware. Emulators such as QEMU and Box don't suffer from this problem and can run OS2. A beta of VMware Workstation 2.0 released in January of 2000 was the first hypervisor that could run OS2 at all. Later, the company decided to drop official OS2 support. Virtual PC from Microsoft, originally a ConnectX product, has been able to run OS2 without hardware virtualization support for many years. It also provided additions code which greatly improves host-guest OS interactions in OS2. The additions are not provided with the current version of Virtual PC, but the version last included with a release may still be used with current releases. At one point, OS2 was supported host for Virtual PC in addition to a guest. Note that OS2 runs only as a guest on those versions of Virtual PC that use virtualization, x86 based host, and not those doing full emulation like Virtual PC for Virtual PC for Mac. VirtualBox from Oracle Corporation originally Innotech, later Sun product. Supports OS2 1.x, Warp 3 through 4.5, and Ecom Station, as well as other OS2 as guests. However, attempting to run OS2 and Ecom Station can still be difficult, if not impossible, because of the strict requirements of VTX and AMD hardware-enabled virtualization, and only ACP2 MCP2 is reported to work in a reliable manner. ArcaOS supports being run as a virtual machine, guest inside VirtualBox, VMware ESXi, and VMware Workstation. It ships with the VirtualBox guest additions and the driver improvements to improve performance as a guest operating system. The difficulties in efficiently running OS2 have at least once created an opportunity for a new virtualization company. A large bank in Moscow needed a way to use OS2 on newer hardware that OS2 did not support. As virtualization software is an easy way around this, the company desired to run OS2 under a hypervisor. Once it was determined that VMware was not a possibility, it hired a group of Russian software developers to write a host-based hypervisor that would officially support OS2. Thus, the Parallels Inc. company and their Parallels Workstation product was born. Some problems were classic subjects of comparison with other operating systems when talking about OS2, IBM's OS2. Synchronous input queue. If a graphical user application was not servicing its window messages, the entire graphical user interface system could get stuck, and the reboot was required. This problem was considerably reduced with later Warp 3 fix packs and refined by Warp 4. By taking control over the application after it had not responded for several seconds. And the second is no unified object handles, OS2 version 2.11 and earlier. The availability of threads probably led the system designers to overlook mechanisms which allow a single thread to wait for different types of asynchronous events at the same time. For example, the keyboard and mouse in a console program. Even though select was added later, it only worked on network sockets. In case of a console program, dedicating a separate thread of waiting on each source of events made it difficult to properly release all the input devices before starting other programs in the same session. As a result, console programs usually polled the keyboard and the mouse alternately, which resulted in wasted CPU and the characteristic jerky reactivity to user input. In OS2 version 3.0, IBM introduced a new call for this specific problem. Some historical uses of IBM's OS2. OS2 has been widely used in Iran Export Bank, Bank Saderat Iran, in their teller machines, ATMs and local servers, over 30,000 working stations. As of 2011, the bank moved to virtualize and renew their infrastructure by moving OS2 to virtual machines running over Windows. OS2 was widely used in Brazilian banks. Banco do Brasil had a peak of 10,000 machines running OS2 Warp in the 1990s. OS2 was used in automated teller machines until 2006. The workstations and automated teller machines and attendant computers have been migrated to Linux. OS2 has been used in the banking industry. Suncorp Bank in Australia still ran its ATM network on OS2 as late as in 2002. ATMs at Perisher Blue used OS2 as late as 2009 and even the turn of the decade. OS2 was widely adopted by accounting professionals and auditing companies. In mid-1990s, native 32-bit accounting software were well developed and serving corporate markets. OS2 ran the faulty baggage handling system at the Denver International Airport. The OS was eventually scrapped, but the software written for the system led to massive delays in the opening of the new airport. The OS itself was not at fault, but the software written to run on the OS was. The baggage handling system was eventually removed. OS2 was used by radio personality Howard Stern. He once had a 10-minute on-air rant about OS2 versus Windows 95 and recommended OS2. He also used OS2 on his IBM 760 CD laptop. OS2 was used as part of the satellite operations support system for NPR's public radio satellite system. SOSS was a computer control system using OS2 that NPR member stations used to receive programming feeds via satellite. SOSS, the Satellite Operating Support System, was introduced in 1994 using OS2 version 3.0 and was retired in 2007 when NPR switched over to its successor, the Content Depot. OS2 was used to control the SkyTrain automated light rail system in Vancouver, Canada until the late 2000s when it was replaced by Windows XP. OS2 was used in the London Underground Jubilee Line Extension Signals Control System, GLESCS, in London, England. This control system delivered by Alcatel was in use from 1999 to 2011. Between abandonment before opening of the line's unimplemented original automatic train control system and the present cell track system, GLESCS did not provide automatic train operation, only manual train supervision. 6 OS2 local site computers were distributed along the railway between Stratford and Westminster, the shunting tower at Stratford Market Depot, and several formed the central equipment located at Neasden Depot. It was once intended to cover the rest of the line between Green Park and Stanmore, but this was never introduced. OS2 has been used by the Cooperative Bank in the UK for its domestic call center staff, using a bespoke program created to access customer accounts which cannot easily be migrated to Windows. OS2 has been used by the Stop and Shop supermarket chain and has been installed in new stores as recently as March of 2010. OS2 has been used on ticket machines for Tramlink in outer London. OS2 has been used in New York City's subway system for Metro cards. Rather than interfacing with the user, it connects simple computers and the mainframes. When NYC MTA finishes its transition to contactless payment, OS2 will be removed. OS2 was used in checkout systems at Safeway supermarkets. OS2 was used by Trenitalia both for the desktops at ticket counters and for the automatic ticket counters up to even to 2011. Incidentally, the automatic ticket counters with OS2 were more reliable than the current ones running a flavor of Windows. OS2 was used as the main operating system for Abbey National General Insurance Motor and Home Direct Call Center products, using the PMSC Series 3 insurance platform on DB 2.2 from 1996 through 2001. Some IBM products utilizing OS2. IBM has used OS2 in a wide variety of hardware products, effectively as a form of embedded operating system. The product IBM 3494, which is a tape library, it used OS2 as the operating system for the library manager. that controlled the tape accessor robot. IBM's 3745 communications controller used OS2 as the operating system for the service processor, and if installed the network node processor as well. IBM 3890, a document processor, used the OS2 in the form that the 3890 XP1 was announced November 12th of 1988, and it initially used OS2 version 1.1 extended edition on PS2 model 80 to emulate the stacker control software that previously ran on System 360. IBM later switched to OS2 Warp. IBM 47 3X, which was an automatic teller machine, an ATM, used OS2 in a range of automatic teller machines manufactured by IBM. Was also used in later 47X ATMs manufactured with Diebold. IBM 9762 mainframe product used OS2 as the operating system for the support element, and was also used in later mainframe models such as the IBM 2064 and the 2074. This was all I had on IBM's OS2. I didn't really go into Ecom Station and ArcaOS because I'm planning to get a copy on both. I think I have Ecom Station, the latest one, somewhere, and I contacted ArcaOS as well. Because I don't really feel like paying €100 for a personal license myself if I can get it for free or cheaper, knowing the fact that this podcast doesn't really make a dime for me. Actually, it takes my money away, so it starts to be like an old car, which I love, but it takes my time and my money. Anyhow, I think I will maybe at some point when I'm very bored, I will bring up both Ecom Station and ArcaOS, and maybe I can talk about them. But actually, they are like I said in this episode, they are a continuation of OS2 in a sense that they are using IBM's license of OS2, and they build upon that to be exact. But I will see if I can do some comparison about that. BOS would be definitely one to talk about, which I remember that me growing up, I remember BOS. It came on the scene. It was, as much as I know, it was heavily influenced by OS2. I hope I am right. Somehow I remember that it was influenced by that, and BOS is definitely one thing which I want to talk about. I will dig up a copy of BOS as well. I hope it was influenced by IBM's OS2, or it's just my mind thought that it was. But I will definitely talk about BOS in some later episodes. I hope you enjoyed this two-part history on IBM's OS2. It's an important cornerstone, and it could have been more than what it became. But as you see, the history decided to be Microsoft Windows to be the winning one. Otherwise, we would be all be using IBM's OS2 today on our computers at our workplaces, and we will be supporting issues with OS2 and OS2 applications. But yeah, history decided otherwise. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next Saturday with episode 81.